Hi everyone, my name's Jane and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm so happy to be here at the Music City Roundup. I've heard such great things about this particular Roundup, and this is my first time in Nashville too, so I'm excited to get out and see the sights and hit the streets on Monday, actually tomorrow afternoon. But again, thank you so much, Molly, for your warm welcome. She truly is the hostess with the mostest. We've had a lot of fun, and she's really gone way above and beyond to help us to feel welcome. And again, I want to thank Steve Lee, who is just awesome, and I appreciate everything that you've done to bring this awesome crowd of people together. And it's so nice to finally meet Connie. I've heard about Connie for such a long time now. But also to thank the committee for everything that you've done. I know the hard work that goes into putting these on. So let's give the committee another warm round of applause. And I always like to start off by talking a little bit about grace and how amazing grace is. You know, I always think about grace as being sort of this really cool undercurrent, this like flow that goes through life that offers us things like peace and illumination and forgiveness. So I want to again invite Grace in to the room right now. For me, grace is sort of that inner realization that we are one with God. You know, it's nothing that we have to do or earn. It's just there. All we have to do is just tap into it. And if it's okay with you, I'd like also to, if you wouldn't mind joining me by bowing your heads and saying the third step prayer. It sort of just helps me to turn it over. God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, so that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Amen. Holy Spirit, guide me and enlighten me. Put the words in my mouth that somebody must need to hear. Okay, so this awesome program of Alcoholics Anonymous, this 12-step program that's a spiritual path, not a religious one, a spiritual path that provides me with a life-giving, life-saving, life-sustaining gift that we all call sobriety. We're all here to celebrate that this weekend, right? I know that every single person in this room probably should be dead. And I'm talking about the Al-Anons too, you know? But for some reason we're here, you know? And our dark paths sometimes become our greatest gifts. And that's one of the miracles of the program that the Big Book talks about, is that each day somewhere in this world, one alcoholic shares their story with another alcoholic. And God speaks to each of us differently in different ways, but I have this feeling that God hopes that we'll share our stories. And the program is filled with these really cool counterintuitive messages. Like, for example, we have to die in order to live. We have to suffer in order to be well. We have to give it away in order to keep it. So that's why I'm here today sharing my story. I know that any one of you could be up here at the podium today sharing your story. We all have a story to tell. But today I'm the lucky one to be commissioned by Alcoholics Anonymous to share a little bit about my strength, my experience, what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. So I'll go ahead and get right into it. If you haven't noticed, my accent's not Southern. I'm from a little town in Caldwell, New Jersey. Jersey, yeah, Jersey in the house. And I grew up. Well, first of all, let me say, last night I wanted to thank the other speakers too. Howard was awesome last night. Oh my gosh. Stephanie, you know, I mean, just amazing, all the speakers. But when Howard was I was looking up at the 35th Music City Roundup sign, and I was like, what was I doing 35 years ago? And actually, it was funny because, it's one of those weird serendipitous things, but that is the year that I really started using. So I was thinking the first year of this Roundup was the first year that I really, dove into this disease. And so anyway, to save you the math, I'm 53 years old. And I was born November 20th, 1962, and I'm one of 5 kids. My mom and dad have this model happy marriage. They actually in May just celebrated 58 years of being married. So, and that, I know, it's amazing. And, the other cool thing about listening to stories is we hear stories from the spectrum, the whole spectrum. People who, grew up with traumatic childhoods all the way through to people who were born with, silver spoons in their mouth. And I am on that part of the spectrum. I heard Rich's story before, and he shared a story Thursday night, pretty similar to the way that I was raised. Great family, loving parents. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was, the one that demanded respect. He was the one that brought home the bread and butter. It was left to mom to nurture and love and cherish the kids. And I always like sharing a little bit about my dad because I'm so proud of him. But he was actually favored to be the first ever to break the 4-minute mile. And then he went on also to be an NCAA winning track and field coach for Manhattan College back in the 70s. So and then when he was racing himself, he was like this skinny little white kid from East Orange, New Jersey that was like one of the fastest runners in the world. It says a lot about his work ethic and his sense of discipline, and he passed that on to all 5 of us kids. Just happy childhood. The blood that courses through my veins is 100% Irish, which I think disposes me to this disease of addiction. And I also always like mentioning that I was raised in a very Irish Catholic family. So I think that, like Stephanie was saying, her Italian Catholic gets some reactions. The Irish Catholic thing does too. It's sort of like this way of life, And it was really, I went to a Catholic elementary school. I actually went to an all-girl Catholic high school, a small private high school too. And it was one of those things that we heard from my parents, like, we're going to send you to the best of schools, but you better not let us down. You have to do what's expected of you. And we all did, I was a good girl. I always believed in God. I felt like God was watching me, so I always wanted to be good because I didn't want to let him down, and I of course didn't want to go to hell. So, but I really tried to do the right thing. In high school, I was the all-American kid, I was on the track team, of course. But I also was on the student council, the drama club, the choir, all that kind of stuff. And I always like giving one of my high school friends a shout out, just out of, it's a respect thing. But I graduated in 1981, and there were 81 girls in my class, and one of them was Whitney Houston. And unfortunately, she did not escape the hell of this disease. But I'm here to tell you, she was the all-American kid too. She was just like we were, There's no reason why she should have become an addict or an alcoholic if she stayed on the path that we were in, in high school. She was loved and respected, and yeah. But anyway, and I am one of those that had a really good experience growing up in the Catholic thing. I loved the nuns that I had all throughout. I had nuns that taught, especially in high school, taught us to be leaders, to give glory about being a woman, and even the priests were always just wonderful men, great guides. And I know as of late the Catholic Church gets slammed a lot, so I just wanted to throw that in there. I have a good, successful, love story with the way that I was raised. And so the first time I got drunk, I was 14, and I went to the movies with my older cousin who was 18. And it was actually the original Star Wars. And I always marvel at, how cool that is, because my cousin had a bottle of rum. Actually, they had 2 bottles of rum, and they just kept dumping the rum in our Cokes. And I remember just sitting there, and we all know that really beautiful, warm feeling when it goes down our throat. And then, this little euphoric buzz very soon after. And I was just like, woo! I was just taken off. And back in the day, we had never seen any cinematography like that before. It was all like, whoa! I mean, I was flying around intergalactically with Han Solo on that Millennium Falcon, and I was just like, wow, man, this is cool. And I always think how appropriate it is that that was my first drunk, because quite literally, it took me out of this world, put me on this whole new plane, and catapulted me into this extraordinary galaxy, And I loved it while it was happening. Unfortunately, I got so sick after. So it wasn't like one of those, how sometimes we hear in the stories like, oh, it was my magic elixir, it made me feel normal for the first time. For me, it wasn't like that. I was already gregarious and funny and, filled with laughter. It just, amplified it for me. And that's what I went for the whole rest of my my drinking, especially in my college years. It wasn't to numb anything or anything. It was to make this ordinary Jane extraordinary. It amplified, it gave me courage, it gave me self-esteem. It made me, you give me a dare, I'll do it, believe me. And I wanted to light up the room when I walked in for a party. It was just that kind of a thing. So anyway, I didn't drink again until I went to college. And I'm here to tell you that it was the 1980s. Right, I graduated from high school in '81, as I said, so it was the early '80s, and it was like the sheltered Catholic schoolgirl being let loose in the biggest, baddest city in the world. And Manhattan College is actually in the Bronx, so it's the last stop on the 1 train, 242nd Street and Broadway. So I had access to the big city whenever I wanted, And so I started, to drink, like with all my friends. And believe it or not, Manhattan College is a Catholic college too. And so all my friends were Italian, Irish, that we all went to private Catholic schools. And I saw them all going crazy. I mean, they were going bonkers, with drinking every night and smoking weed and all that kind of stuff. So I was just like, oh, well, this is all part of the experience. Let me join in and go ahead and do it. And believe me, I did. And like freshman year, I always like to share this example. Freshman year, I put on 25 pounds first semester. And I'm here to tell you it was not the food. It was definitely the beer and the drinking and the partying. And so, and then just all these other things just started to, to be opened to me. The social life down in New York. Now, this is the days of Studio 54, the Tunnel, the Peppermint Lounge, all the clubs. So I was almost like addicted to the social life too. I did not want to miss a trick. I went out every night. I wanted to live it out, but all the while thinking I'm just sowing my wild oats, just like any other kid is out doing, right? And someday I'll settle down and whatever. So I really did tear up that city. I mean, New York City in the 80s was everything all the time, life in the fast lane, and I lived it. And when I got out of high school, I had aspirations of being pre-med because I graduated. I was the salutatorian in my class. So, but by the end of freshman year, I was a creative writing major with a French minor, and I just loved, to just party, and I was like this. I turned into this hippie chick, and and it was kind of hard, when you think of it. Our culture is sort of hell bent on controlling and really defining and telling women who and what they're supposed to be. And I was confused. I didn't know what the heck I was supposed to be. I thought I was supposed to get married and have kids and blah, 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 blah. And then the other part is like, no, you've got this adventuresome spirit. You should travel and see the world and be an independent working woman. I mean, it was very confusing. So I kind of tried on a whole bunch of hats, sort of like what I did with music. I was And I love music, by the way. That's why I'm so thrilled to be here in Nashville. In New Jersey, however, we didn't even have a country music radio station. That was like a sin, I think, you know. So my music was, of course, sex and drugs and rock and roll. And that was the lifestyle that we lived in New York City, and especially in the 80s. It was the decade of excess, and I was right in the middle of it. So by sophomore year, I started to do to not only drink but also smoke a lot of pot and snort a lot of cocaine. And I know there are outside issues, and I'm all about singleness of purpose, but they were all byproducts of my drinking. You know, the one was like that it made me, whenever I drank, it kind of, you know, made the experience a little more profound. The one that I smoked just kind of made everything a little groovier, you know, and then the one that I snorted just made everything faster and quicker and made me drink longer than I normally would before I passed out. So, and I really like to think of alcoholism and addiction as a disease of the brain that translates into abnormal behaviors, and we have tons of abnormal behaviors when we're drinking, right? We all know what I'm talking about. Theft, crime, writing bad checks, waking up next to God knows who, and one of mine was going to the ATM and getting money out at all hours, you know, so I could get more drugs to keep and alcohol so I could keep drinking. So, okay, so you get the picture. College was college, but I was really blessed with like an innocent-looking face and a good brain, so I was able to really manipulate and talk my way into and out of everything. And so junior year, I was getting really tired, and I got accepted to go over to France. And so I said, you know, this was the first of my geographic changes. So I did. I went over to France, and I said, with you know, that determination, okay, I'm a junior now, I'm about to be a senior, I need to get my act together. I'm not going to party at all when I get over there, and I'm going to really get serious about my studies. Well, that didn't quite work out the way I planned. I got over there, and I was living with a French family, and they had a 19-year-old college student living with them who was the nanny for one of the kids, and she was just as wild as I was. And I lived in Nantes, France, and we tore up Nantes, France. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you. She knew everybody. She was socially connected. She was connected in every way you want to be connected if you're an alcohol or an addict. And so that was on. I got through that, and then I had the great opportunity. And the reason why I'm sharing some of this stuff is I really did have a lot of fun, you know, doing some of this. Like this, it was still fun at this stage of the game. And I know sometimes alcoholics are like, no, Jane, you just think you were having fun. It's like, no, I was having a lot of fun, believe me. And so when I got back so I backpacked through Europe, which is a great opportunity, right? But what I learned is that everywhere a party person goes, we magnetize other party people. I mean, when I think back on my, I backpacked through Europe. We hit 11 countries, and I had $300. I had my plane ticket, but $300 to spend. So the first stop we made, I spent $150 on, you can guess what, in Amsterdam. And then right after that, we went to England, and I got my hair done with pretty much the rest of the money. And it was in the 80s, so it was like I had this hot pink hair shaved up one side with white shoots coming out the front. And that's the other thing. I was like a chameleon. Like, I loved rock and roll, but I also had a punk rock stage, then that new wave stage. That's what I was in when I was in London. And then, like, the goth look. I mean, I kind of was trying everything on for size, if you know what I mean. But in my heart, I was always rock and roll. So anyway, after backpacking through Europe, same thing. I went back to New York with I swear 100% resolve. Now I've really got to straighten up my act. I'm a senior in college. I'm about to get a job. This is it. Well, forget it. It was on worse than ever. So just again, looking back, it was the progression of this disease. Things got worse. Everything got worse. My drinking, my using, My family started to not invite me to family events. This is when the problems with my parents and my siblings all started to arise. I started to have big time problems with men, and you guys all know, any woman who, or anybody really in the room, we choose drinking partners, right? I always chose drinking men. This is the stage in my life where things just started to, like every line that I said I would never cross, I started to cross. I would become incapable of acting in a way that would preserve my dignity or integrity. When it came to men, I was a people pleaser. I had, sometimes bad semi-consensual sex that I would feel so guilty about. I'd wake up in a haze, and the only thing that would clear up that haze would be another drink. And that cycle of guilt just kept happening over and over again. And alcohol liquefied that guilt and made it all bearable for me. I don't know if anyone can relate to that, but it was more about it was about control. It was this weird control. My self-esteem was so bad, I just wanted to lure the guy in. What happened afterwards was inconsequential. It just fed my self-esteem. So it was really kind of sad, and it was where did that come from? I wasn't raised like that. So anyway, I graduated from college, and I taught high school. I got a job teaching high school. And I moved to a city called Hoboken, New Jersey, which was right across the river from Manhattan. And again, in the 80s, Hoboken was still being built up, rejuvenated or whatever. So it was a lot of actors and artists and teachers. And but let me tell you, I was I was just like a bridge or a tunnel away from the city that I loved. The city that was truly my addiction. So anyway, in Hoboken, I taught at a school not too far away, and I have absolutely no idea. Again, that crazy, sick work ethic that was instilled in us by my dad. It's you play hard, you still show up for work. Whatever you do, you show up for work. I don't care what kind of, party life you're having, you show up for work. And I swear I lived by that. I don't know how I did it. Well, actually, yes, I do. A chemical substance called cocaine. And I would show up for work, and I would, and I thought I was being a great teacher, and I'd get off on these great, just craziness. And I did that for 3 years. And then I knew that I was, again, crossing all those lines. I had a relationship with a married man, and I knew I had to make another geographic change. So a friend of mine was teaching in Japan for a year. He had a year sabbatical, and he said, Jane, why don't you come over, take the year off, get away from Hoboken, get away from New York, go teach in Japan. And I remember thinking, God, I heard in Japan if you get caught with a joint, you go to jail for 7 years or something. That's the place that I want to go. That way I'll never do anything. So I swear, I got hired. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Japan. I remember the dudes, and I got on the plane. It's so wild that this just came to me, but I got on the plane with money, enough cash, because back then we had to pay cash to buy alcohol on the plane, and an 8-ball of Coke for a plane trip to Japan. How crazy is that? Can you imagine me bouncing around on that plane? Oh my gosh. So anyway, I remember the guy sitting next to me was like, man, that's pretty brave. You just got the job and you're going to Japan. Do you speak any Japanese? And I was like, no, but I know how to say domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. That's about it. Sake to me. I knew that one too. So anyway, went to Japan, and again, the resolve was there. The cycle continues. I got over there. I said, I'm going to straighten out my act. What did I do? I ran into the craziest, wildest Brits, Australians, New Zealanders. We partied our butts off and got away with everything, because that's just how it is in Japan. They just kind of turn the other way when they called us henagaijin, crazy foreigners. So we got away with everything, and so I went for a year, and I ended up staying for 3. Now, while I was over there, I knew that I thought, I'll show my family. They're not, they'll miss me when I'm gone. let me tell you, they were so happy that I was out of their lives. They were so happy that I was on the other side of the world. I remember calling home, now it's like something like a 12-hour difference. I would call home Japan time at like 5 a.m., drunk off my butt, with my poor little mother, who, by the way, reminds me a lot of Stephanie. I've told you that before. My mother should have been a nun. She was very controlling, and everything had to be just so. And, my poor mother, what I put my parents through, oh my gosh. But anyway, Japan was when I started to really realize that I had a problem. Why? Because I started waking up with the shakes. And when I taught in Japan, I taught for Time Life Services. So I taught Japanese businessmen who were about to be shipped overseas to live, in the States or in Canada. So it was a total immersion program. Because I was a real teacher, it was a great job. But I had to go to the training center and live with them for a month and eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner with them and drink with them every night. And they were happy because, it was out of their regimented lifestyle, because life over in Japan is tough, believe me. So for them, this was like a month-long vacation. So we went out and drank every night. And some really good cultural exchanges went down, I'll tell you that. But it was really, it was a great time. And again, I'm friends with so many of my friends during that period of time. But we were crazy. We were crazy. And I know that just to give you an idea of how bad things got, one of my closest friends is in London now, and a couple of years ago she was going through her diary, and she came across a journal entry that she actually cut out and sent me, and it said, "My friend Jane decided to cut back on her drinking, which means she didn't drink for lunch on Thursday." That's how bad things had gotten. So anyway, I'm like, okay, well, I was done with Japan, and I moved back home, and I thought, again, I'm going to straighten out my act. Life is there. I got to start growing up. By this time, I'm like almost 32. I'm like 31. And, at that age, drinking like that's just not cute anymore. And it really wasn't fun anymore either. And, but I still thought that I had it under control. And when I got home, my family had high hopes, and when they saw me, they knew that things were just on. So I got my first DUI in New York, and when I think of how many DUIs I should have gotten before that first one, oh my God! I mean, I used to get frustrated and just leave. I would park my car on the sidewalks and not even know where it was until I waited until I could call the pound, and I knew it would be there a couple days later. I mean, I should have had thousands of DUIs, but I got popped. And so that's when I remember telling my parents, that's when my mother disowned me. And I'll never forget the fight that we had, but she actually slapped me in the face too. And then I was like, I'm done, I'm out of here. And a friend of mine had a restaurant down in the Florida Keys. And he said, you lost your license for 6 months with your DUI. Come down to the Keys. You can ride your bike anywhere. So I swear to God, I went down to the Florida Keys to try and get clean and sober. That was my idea. That was what I thought was going to happen. So anyway, when I got down there, things got really bad. The job didn't turn out all right. He had ulterior motives. I did not want to partake in them. I ended up, being the darkest days of my life. That incomprehensible demoralization that the big book talks about. I used to love drinking vodka, fancy schmancy vodkas like Stolichnaya, and man, I had a bottle of Popov that I would just slurp out of, and how I used to love to smoke weed all the time and snort cocaine. Well, I started smoking crack. And I had, this is crazy, I had a lawsuit coming through, so I spent almost $15,000 in a month and a half on alcohol and drugs. And I got down to 100 pounds. I would just hit this and I would turn black and blue because I never ate. And I was on actually this road to self-destruction. I didn't have the courage to kill myself, so I was just going to go out, with a heart attack or whatever. And I knew it. And every time I would look in the mirror, it would be like I didn't even know who that woman was that I was looking at. You know that proverbial thing, we hear that a lot in our stories. Well, I really had it. I remember the time it happened. It was a really dark period. I had been up for days. I looked in the mirror. I did not recognize that woman that was in the mirror. So I called a cousin. I went up to Fort Lauderdale. She, God love her, with her kids, and she had young kids at the time and everything, and she took me in, and I started to straighten out my act. I met a guy, and he was living in Austria at the time, and but he was really into, I worked for a travel agent at the time too, so he was into like X-Adventure tour packages, so really cool guy. So he wanted to go down to the Florida Keys to check out the water sports. And I was just like, oh, God, you know, but okay. So we went down, and I remember the first tiki bar we hit, we went in and had a bunch of drinks. And we did that progressing all the way down to Marathon, which is the middle of the Keys. And I remember that night we watched the sunset by the old 7 Mile Bridge, and they had just blown that bridge up for that movie True Lies with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and so the bridge was blown up, but I didn't know this, so we went out, continued to drink, and it was probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. Had this bright idea to go back down to the bridge to watch the sun come up. So off we go with a case of beer, a bag of weed, bottle of tequila, and we were going to just watch the sun come up. So we turn, this is the part of the story that I hate. So we're going down this bridge road, and I just remember it looked like it was this road to nowhere. And we ran around a little curve, and all of a sudden, this huge thunderclap just went through my whole being. And this bolt of lightning. And I just remember I put my hand down to my ankle, and I lifted up my hand, and it was just blood dripping out, and I felt the bones in my ankle, and I started freaking out. I was like, oh my God, where did this thing come from? And the whole front of the car had like just accordioned. And if I hit that, it was like the concrete barrier wall. On the other side was the water. So if I hit that thing any harder, we would have just gone right into the water. And then I shaking Max's hand like, Max, wake up, what are we going to do? How are we going to get out of here? Oh my God. And he just looked like he was sleeping. And it didn't take me too long to figure out that he wasn't breathing and that he was dead. I can't even begin to tell you what was going through my mind in that car. I'm just like, God, please take me too. There's no way I'm going to be able to live. I hate this part, you guys, so I'm going to try and like just fast forward. So anyway, I remember, the next thing I remember was I was teleported to the hospital, and I remember I was just screaming. Oh, and let me just share this too. The police officer that found me several hours later swears that he had a spiritual experience. He said he was actually going down the regular bridge road, and he said he had this like something came over him, and he literally backed up on that road and went down, and he said he was not at all surprised to see what he saw. So he was so kind and loving. He was like, hang in there, we're going to get you out of here, and I just kept thinking, why is he being so nice to me? I'm like this drunk driver that just killed this precious person sitting next to me. And, you know, it was the first of a lot of people like just being nice to me, and I felt like I didn't deserve it. Even in the hospital, when I think of all those nurses, I just thought everyone was going to hate me. So anyway, and then I remember the first thing, I must have blacked out for days, but the first thing I remember was looking up and seeing my dad and one of my brothers, and I remember the first words that I said to my dad were, "Dad, this didn't happen because I was drinking," you know? And I'll never forget the look on his face, just like, oh my God, what is it going to take? You know, that denial is so messed up. So, and my mother just did not even want, she said she was waiting for that phone call for years and years and years, and she was so angry and filled with shame and guilt, and she just didn't want to have anything to do with me, which really hurt. You know, I would have thought my mother would have been the one that was there for me, but it was actually my dad. So, okay, I'm getting it together. So the next thing I knew was a very long recovery. I broke my neck at C1, C2, which is the same fracture that Christopher Reeve had. You know, and a third of the people are killed instantly. The other third are brain damaged, and the other third are paralyzed. And here I'm standing before you today. Like, I mean, it's a miracle, which kind of made me feel like that was one thing that made me feel good. Like, I should be dead. So the reason why I'm here, I'm definitely left here for a reason, you know. And so I was in the hospital for many, many months, and then I was let out on my own recognizance because I was so messed up physically. I had to go through physical therapy, but I knew prison was coming, you know. So when I was out on my own recognizance is when I moved to St. Pete Beach, Florida, with a friend, and I was only allowed out of the house to go to physical therapy and to go to AA meetings. And the judge said that I had to go to an AA meeting every day. So I got up, and it was a block away, and I was on my walker, and I had a Philadelphia neck brace, and I swear it would take me like a half hour to get from here to the back door. But I did, and that group really, I'm going to get emotional again because they literally saved my life. I mean, I had people at that meeting just, you know, loving me and not judging me. I remember thinking, like, are these people getting paid for this? I mean, what the heck? And they were driving me to my physical therapy, and they were saying things like, honey, there but for the grace of God go I. I'm telling you, I drove with my 4 kids and blackouts, and you know, and I started hearing stories like that, and for some reason it just made me feel better hearing that other people did messed up stuff too. And then I did that until I was able to walk, and then I decided to plead guilty. I wasn't going to plead not guilty. I'm like working an honest program. I needed to take responsibility for everything that happened and just plead guilty. I knew I was going to prison, so it was just a matter of how long. So the long and short of it is I got sentenced to 5 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. And, you know, when I think about prison too, it's funny because just this past Thursday, I voluntarily went into a prison for the first time. I felt ready to do it. And I spoke at it was the Women's Federal Prison in Talahassee, and I spoke at their substance abuse graduation. And oh my gosh, it just brought me back, and how, you know, just how precious those women are, you know. I swear, one of the biggest resentments that I have is that I didn't write Orange is the New Black. And I should tell you this too. My parents, when I was in prison, and my siblings, they all must have had a family meeting because they did not send me 1 penny the whole time I was in there, which was very humiliating because I had to use like the state toothpaste and the state shampoo and all that. But my mother's famous line, I know people think it's funny, she's like, you know what, you think I'm going to send you money so you can eat potato chips and drink Coca-Cola in prison? I don't think so, you know. You're there to be punished, you know, that kind of thing. So they really didn't send me any money. And so I joke, I'm like, yeah, if I wrote Orange is the New Black, the chapter 1 would be, I'm nobody's boo because I'm a broke-ass bitch. I mean, it really was embarrassing. But anyway, let me tell you, it worked because I will never go back there. I swear. Even when I got out, I was like, I will do whatever it takes to not go back to prison. But when I was in there, I learned a lot of things. I learned first and foremost that these were some of the finest women in my life. And I know previously I would have judged. If you said you were in prison, I would have been like, whoa, But they were some of the loveliest, most beautiful souls I've ever met in my life, just like the women who we went in and who I spoke to the other day. And also, I should mention this, when I was in prison, the highlight of my week would be when we had AA people come in. So whoever works in prison with prisons, with inmates, bringing the 12-step programs in there, I mean, God bless you, because what that did for me was it made me see these women, and I wanted what they had. That was the first time I saw that. Like, look, they're cool, they're funny, they're pretty, they've got it together, they're saying they're happy, joyous, and free. That's exactly what I want. And I started, really getting into the meetings, and I also really loved doing my step work with my sponsor who was still in St. Pete. And then another turning point that I had in prison was with a really cool Catholic priest who actually, it was Easter week and I went to confession. And after confession, I, of course, said the same sin. And I looked up at him and he was this handsome young priest. He kind of looked like Jesus Christ in the Sacred Heart photos with the beard, And when I looked up after I said my confession, he was like, his chin was shaking, and I was just like, oh my God, look, he's going to cry, or whatever. And then I realized, he's not going to cry, he's angry. And he did. He said, you know what, Jane? If I could, I would pick you up by the collar, throw you up against the wall, and slap you silly, because I am sick and tired of hearing you say the same sin over and over and over again. Every time I tell you, God forgives you. Who do you think you are to be above God's forgiveness? Really? So do me a favor and don't come back to confession, don't come back to Mass actually, until you start to realize that God forgives you. It's thrown out there into the sea of forgiveness. You keep reeling it back in. Let it go. Until then, don't come back. And I was just like, whoa, from a priest? But I'll tell you something. That was that was a turning point for me. That got me where I needed to be gotten, And not only did I start to work on self-forgiveness, more importantly, I started to work on redemption. It's like, I'm sitting here filled with self-pity. I'm trying to work this program, but I'm not putting my whole heart and soul into it. I got to start working on proving myself to people, So that was the beginning of that journey. And then another Catholic priest who actually was from New Jersey and Irish, he came in and said Mass one Sunday and then said, by the way, I talked to the warden. I am an alcoholic in recovery, and I got permission to do 5th steps with any of you ladies if you wanted to do it. And I was like, whoa, confession and 5th step, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Yeah, sign me up. So I did, and it was just, again, I started to just really start to feel like less of a freak and more of a member of the human race, And I'll tell you something. I am so grateful that I had every experience that I've had. We all know what that's all about. Every adversarial thing that presented itself to me, it helped me to grow. Everything bad that happened to me, even when I was in prison, hey, I took it on the chin and I grew from it. That's just what we have to do. Slowly but surely, I started to rebuild my relationship with my family. I'm going to fast forward to getting out. I did 4 years and 3 months, and then I'll tell you something, and then probation was no joke, 10 years. And part of my probation was I had to go to an AA meeting every day. Even my probation officer was like, man, I never heard of this before. Every day? So when I got out, the first thing I did was, first thing I did was I went to the beauty shop and got the gray washed out of my hair. Second thing I did was I went to an AA meeting, and get this, the women that brought the meeting into prison were at that very first meeting. I was like, it's a sign! And they were like, oh my God, when did you get out? And I was like, today! They were like, what? So, it was just like, it was wild. And then, so I really felt like that's my home group. So that's my home group today, Central Group 909 in Tallahassee, Florida. I forgot to mention at the beginning because I was nervous. So I've been sober since September 24th, 1996. And that's my home group. That's where I've been going. So thank you. Thank you so much. And, I prefer to just sort of glance at my past rather than stare at it, because the big book tells us that, right? Page 86. But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. So, every day I do what they tell me to do. I make my own review, and I ask for God's forgiveness, and I inquire what corrective measures need to be taken in the event that I do something wrong. I keep it really simple. As I live my life today, I know that if I stumble, the answer is just 12 steps away. Just quickly, I wanted to talk a little bit about step work. Howard talked about it last night. While the depth of our bottoms is unique to each and every one of us, the common principle that we have is that surrender. The pain of our humiliation is mitigated by that fact, like we've thrown in the towel. And man, I was so humiliated. I was done. I was licked. The fight was over for me. And so I decided to embark upon this trek of honesty. And really, for me, that's what step one is all about. Rigorous honesty, self-honesty. It made me realize that whenever things went wrong, it was because I was placing my will between me and God. I had to stop blaming God. And as I mentioned early on, it's funny because it's only when I turned things over that I really felt that spiritual freedom, that independence that they promise us. But my life was so filled with lies and deceits. I had to drop my ego, transcend to a place of humility and honesty in order to move forward. I know that, and the steps helped me to do all of those things. One of the character defects that I still struggle with is resentments. Maybe it's just the Irish in me, I don't know. But I always love to share this prayer that another really cool nun, Sister B, gave me. And it's called Prayer for Freedom of Resentment. So, we were told to pray for people, but this is the one that I love that she gave me. God, help me to look with soft eyes upon all who are part of my days. Break through the barriers of my scrutinizing views. Transform my inner landscape into a peaceful place of acceptance. Pull back my criticisms and my projections. Replace my mean measurements and my biased expectations with an openness that allows others just to be. Cleanse me of everything that clouds my perceptions and blocks the sunlight of your spirit. And then, of course, I proceeded to do my house cleaning. For me, financial amends was huge. I made all my financial amends right out of the gate when I got out of prison. My first job was working as a housekeeper in a hotel, and I swear to God, it was the best job I ever had. It was perfect because it got me back into working, but I'll tell you also it was humiliating because I have 3 degrees from college and I'm making $7 an hour housekeeping. But I loved it. I needed it. Quickly, I worked my way up to the front desk, and I got like a 10-cent raise or something. I made hardly any money, but I loved it. I loved it. And it really served its purpose because when you're in prison for 5 years, you have to re-socialize and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I have to say that on this journey, post-prison, it's difficult. You have the stigma of being an ex-offender, but I used to look people in the eyes and just say, hey, where would any of us be without forgiveness? Please give me a second chance. Where would any of us be without a second chance? And guess what? There were angels waiting at every turn, looking forward to helping me out and giving me a second chance. We're living in that climate even more so today. People want to be part of a success story. So anyway, I decided when I was very early on, I tried to get my teaching certification back, and they told me that I would never teach again with a felony, and I was really bummed about that because I loved teaching. And so I decided, actually when I was in prison, I said, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to love and service. I thought I coined that phrase, you know? So anyway, I decided what better field to go into than social work. So I did my, I lost my license for life too, by the way. No chance ever for a hardship license either because of my previous DUI. I actually had 2 previous DUIs. And so I set up my little thing. I could walk to my AA meetings, I could ride my bike to work, and Florida State University happens to be in Tallahassee, Florida. So I said, I'm going to go back and get my MSW. So I applied. I didn't get in the first time, didn't get in the second time, third time's a charm. I got in. Not only did I get in, but my letter landed in the right hands, and I got a scholarship to go back to grad school. And so I did, and again, I didn't want to let anyone down, so I did really well in school and got my MSW. And then I'm just going to fast forward. I worked in a detox in a psychiatric hospital. I had to go through all sorts of hoops to get my waivers to be able to work with clients in the state system. But I did. Again, I went through boards, and I had to, humiliating getting told no, but I was very persistent, and I was like, I'm not taking no for an answer. And then finally they would just be like, let's just go ahead and give it to this girl because she's not going to leave us alone. And so I was persistent, and I got this great job, and things going great, and I'm going to my AA meetings, and life is good, and I'm rebuilding again my relationship with my family, paying off all my financial amends, doing all the house cleaning that the 12 steps tells us to work on so hard. And I'm really hoping that the promises were coming true in my life. They just were. And any time that I doubted myself, I just turned it over, and we've heard example after example of how God works in our programs if we just keep doing the next right thing. So finally, the couple of years later, I got called by the dean at the College of Social Work, and he asked if I would be interested in teaching one class on Monday nights, and the class was chemical dependency. So I said, yeah, that happens to be my specialty area. So I started teaching. I did well at that, and believe it or not, a couple of years later, I got another call from the dean, and he asked if I would be interested in a full-time faculty position at Florida State University. Can you believe it? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, And so I just got I've been there for 8 years now, and I just got my first promotion. So I'm an associate teaching professor at Florida State, and I have the most incredible job. Every class that I teach, I love. I teach like women's issues. I teach crisis intervention. I teach all these really great classes, and I love teaching. And I'm sharing this not because I'm tooting my own horn, but I was recognized by the students at Convocation a couple of years ago for being a Professor of the Year, and then the National Association of Social Workers voted me as the Social Worker of the Year. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, my life is it's incredible. My relationship with my family has never been better. I really believe that I've practiced the principles of the programs, and it shows in all my affairs. I've really been very, boy, that didn't sound right. Haven't had any affairs in sobriety, but really it just shows that it's never too late to be the person that God truly meant for you to be. And I feel like I'm pretty close to that right now. And Howard also said, one of my favorite sayings, today, happiness is not getting what I want, it's wanting what I get. Because no matter what happens, I'm gonna grow from it. There have been some rough times that happened in sobriety. I got zapped with breast cancer 5 years ago. But you know what? It was wild. It was just like, oh, well, yeah, I got breast cancer, so what do we do? let's do it, you know. And then another thing was I was terrorized. I was stalked by a former student, and it was not a love stalking, it was a hate one. And so much so that the FSU Police Department had armed police officers outside of my classes for several weeks before they got this guy. And unfortunately, he took his own life soon after. But it was really a horrible. Being stalked is a horrible, horrible experience. And again, I'm grateful that I had the 12-step program and the support of my my fellow people in recovery who were with me and understood just how terrorizing that was for me. And I found serenity through it too. But how cool is it that we get the chance to relive our lives and to do some of the things that we never had a chance to do before? The biggest thing, the greatest thing, and I'm going to close soon because I think I'm out of time. Yes. Perfect. The biggest thing that I wanted to talk about is I have found the love of my life at the age of 53. Guess where I'll be in 28 days from this very moment. I will be on the altar getting married. I never would have thought that at this point in my life this would be happening to me. And he is the most incredible man. I mean, Molly knows. I think a lot of you know because you know James. He is, he's kind and loving and romantic and just, I know this is really sappy for a lot of you, but I hope that I'm giving you hope if you haven't found that yet, that don't give up hope because it could happen. And I wanted to ask him if he would stand up just to say hi to everyone, James. And he just moved to Talahassee from Chicago, so he's still getting adjusted. But he works, he's got 32 years of sobriety, and he works a program. I've got some work to do if I want to live up to the bar that he has set. Believe me, he sponsors tons of guys, and the first thing he did when he moved to Tallahassee was started bringing meetings into the local prison. So he's just amazing. He's all of those things, but as you can see, he is hot too. Yeah. So anyway, I want to leave you just with. Just wishing you, I hope that you all always remember that the higher power within you is far greater than any fear that's ever put before you. And I always like closing with this. I forget who wrote it, but anyway, I'm sorry I can't cite who it's from. But it says a new life has been given us. If we follow these principles, we'll find hope instead of despair. Hope instead of desperation. Faith instead of despair. Courage instead of fear. Peace of mind instead of confusion. Self-respect instead of self-contempt. Self-confidence instead of helplessness. We'll gain the respect of others instead of their pity and their contempt. We'll have a clean conscience. That one I love. I love going to sleep at night with a clean conscience instead of guilt. And we'll have real friendships instead of loneliness. If we undergo this vital spiritual experience, this true transformation of self that Bill Wilson talks about, then our life is going to be beyond our wildest dreams. I also like to close with the 12-step prayer, one of my favorites. Dear God, my spiritual awakening continues to unfold. The help I have received I shall pass on and give to others, both in and out of the fellowship. For this opportunity, I am grateful. I pray most humbly to continue walking day by day on the road of spiritual progress. I pray for the inner strength and wisdom to practice the principles of this way of life in all I say and all I do. I need you, my friends, every hour of every day. This is a better way to live. Thank you so much. Yeah.